welcome to you. Nice to have you with us. It's time for another edition of the Coaching Hour. I'm Paul Rotherham, and I'm joined once again by my co-hosts and colleagues and friends, Mary and Marika. Hello, Mary. Mary's still muted. I think she's battling a bit. Hello, Mary. Are you good?
Yes, I'm good, thank you. And you?
Wonderful. You're here just in time. We've just gone live. Marika, hello to you.
Hi, Paul. Nice to be here once again.
Yes, good to have you with us. Now, the third lady, if you are watching this on Facebook Live or even after the event, if you're watching, you'll see there are 4 faces on your screen. The third lady, Marika, I'm going to allow you to introduce and bring us into what we're chatting about today. I'm not so sure if it's a man's topic, but hopefully there's a lot that I'll be able to learn from it nonetheless. Maybe we actually need more educating than the ladies themselves.
I absolutely agree, Paul. I think this would be great for men to also listen to. So today we are privileged to have Dr. Loretta Ferrucci in our presence. She's a registered homeopath and owner of Your Ideal Body, providing holistic health solutions to unlock your own inner healer without restrictive diets or punishing exercise. I love that. And today we're going to talk about menopause, your passage to power. So thank you so much, Loretta. It's great to have you. Before we get into the topic, please just briefly tell us who you are and why you do what you do for a living.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And Paul, stick around. Almost all men live with women who are ultimately going to go through menopause. And if you understand it, your life is going to be so much simpler. So, yes, I'm Dr. Loretta Ferrucci. I am a registered homeopath. I've been in private practice for about 27 years. I closed my practice about 4 years ago, actually just before the pandemic hit, and took my business online. Main reason why I did that was I found that I was limited in the view of how I worked before, in that people saw homeopaths as an alternative provider of medication. And quite frankly, the disease process goes so much further than what medicine are you currently taking. And because I've always been fascinated by what the unconscious patterns are that actually drive our behavior and our choices, and therefore very often our diseases, that's where I've chosen to focus my efforts. So that's me.
Thank you so much. Now, menopause, you call it your passage to power. And why did you choose to move into that direction? What is the power within menopause? Well, firstly, let's tell the listeners and the men out there, what is menopause?
So menopause, believe it or not, is not a disease condition, even though we have medicalized it in our Western medicine system. It is a natural transition. It's the opposite end of puberty. So when young prepubescent girls go through puberty, at the end of the pubescent process, they are now women, right? And they are capable of having babies. So that's the beginning of our fertility cycle. Menopause is the closing off of that fertility cycle. It's the point in our lives where we are no longer capable of having children. And it is a natural transition, just like puberty is a natural transition. So I know these days we are very quick to medicate everything. But you know what? We expect teenagers to be moody. We expect them to be finding themselves. We expect them to have certain issues. We expect them to want their privacy. We expect them to think their parents are uncool. And we allow that transition to happen naturally over 5, 6, well, with men, sometimes 10 years, but sorry, Paul, I couldn't resist. We allow that process to happen. And then what happens at the opposite side of the spectrum, we go, okay, sorry, ladies, old means useless, no longer of any value. Your hormones are going to disappear. Your skin's going to wrinkle. You're going to dry up. You're going to lose your libido. You're going to lose your attractiveness. And basically, you're old and over the hill. And that is a lot of bollocks. And the idea that women become really difficult through menopause is actually true. And the reason why women become more difficult in menopause is because we have a drop in some of those hormones that make us all sort of touchy-feely and want to nurture and care for everyone, and basically put up with having our own needs suspended so that we can see to the needs of our children, because without that, our children won't survive, right? And our energy becomes more internalized. And in actual fact, what happens is we have an increased ratio of male hormones to female hormones. So guys, we become a bit more man-like, which means we're not prepared to put up with the nonsense that we put up with before. And then we turn around and we go, oh, It's menopause. She's so difficult. And then women think, oh my goodness, this is something terrible. I'm sure I need an anxiolytic drug or an antidepressant or whatever. Now, I've got nothing against taking an anxiolytic or an antidepressant if you have to. But you know what? This is part of stepping into your power. And so if women recognize that A, we're not dried up, B, we don't become defunct, the truth is, instead of expending all that energy externally, which is what we do in our fertile years, whether we have biological children or not, we have that tendency to nurture and nourish and grow, right? And when we get to perimenopause into menopause, we start internalizing that energy. And hot flushes, which is one of the symptoms that women complain about the most, is part of that process. You've suddenly got all this energy that is internalized. What are you going to do with it? And this is a time of our lives when we can start asking ourselves the questions like, am I happy? Do I like this job? Am I happy in this relationship, the way it looks? Am I happy being the primary caregiver for everyone? What is it that I really want from my life? And if we don't get physically uncomfortable, we don't ask ourselves that questions. In fact, most of us don't even ask ourselves those questions when we become physically uncomfortable. So I had a teacher, a mentor, Dr. John DeMartini, who said, the mind always lies. The body never does. That's why God put the clues in the body. And so we have these physical symptoms essentially as feedback to try and get our attention. So the more we try and suppress them, well, the louder they have to shout. Just like children. If a child's trying to get your attention, the more you ignore them, you know how they're mummy, 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 and then eventually they get really quiet, and then okay, now there's trouble, right? You better go and have a look what's going on now, right? Because now it's getting real. It's exactly the same in the body. And it's just not just like that with menopause. It's like that with all signs and symptoms, essentially. So what I would love women to know is it's not an estrogen deficiency disease. You're still capable of producing estrogen. In fact, your liver makes estrogen. You produce estrogen from the fat cells around your hips and thighs. The thighs save lives, right? But yes, you do produce a lot less estrogen than what you used to have. You do produce the same amount of testosterone as you always have had. And one of the sort of medical motivations for why we need to look at this more as a disease process is because there's an increased risk in heart disease risk for women, and there's an increased risk in osteoporosis. And yes, we can have mood swings. And we might even have a lack of libido. My question is always, well, are you enjoying sleeping with the person you're sleeping with? Because actually your lack of libido might be more here than it actually is in your body. Just saying, that's a topic for another day, right? And so the truth is that your adrenal glands also help you to produce more estrogen. So your health during menopause and how well or poorly you go through menopause is not actually determined entirely by your hormones, because there are all these mechanisms that control your hormones and regulate your hormones pre-menopause. So your adrenal glands are incredibly important for your menopausal health, and your adrenal glands produce your stress coping hormones. And actually, from an unconscious point of view, your adrenal glands are connected to your true purpose. The more you're aligned with your purpose, whatever you think your purpose is, and this is not a job necessarily, it literally is, what is it that you are longing to express in this life? That's what I believe your purpose is. The more aligned you are with that, the more you cope with the stresses and strains of your life. The less you feel like there's meaning and purpose in your life, the more easily you become stressed. And so what happens is we have these hectically stressful lives, especially as women who are competing in a man's world, if that's what you think you're doing, right? So we have all these challenges essentially. And so our adrenals, by the time we get to menopause, most people's adrenals are already frazzled. And now we're expecting our body to just naturally sort this out for us. Well, actually, it can't naturally sort it out if we haven't provided the right environment. So listen, please stop me if because I can go on, right? So just stop me if you have a question. So
it's fascinating.
The other thing that I just want to make you aware of is that in Oriental medicine, they say that the kidney, not just the function of the kidney, but generally the energy that's associated with your kidney, it governs and controls the health of your adrenals and your hormones. So if you went to a traditional Chinese doctor, they take your pulses and look at your tongue, and they would talk about your kidney qi, right? Qi being like your life essence. So your kidney controls your hormones throughout the whole of your life. and your adrenals, which means that your kidney organ function energy is under more pressure when you are going through puberty, when you're pregnant, and when you're going through menopause. And the emotion that's associated with the kidney function is fear. It's the survival fears we have, those primitive survival fears: time, money, health, security, energy, all of that stuff, right? And so the more we are functioning from those places of avoiding the stuff that we hate, like, I don't want to get old and infirm, as opposed to, I want to create amazing health because I've still got things to do with my life. The more we actually increase that fear, the more we stress our kidney adrenal axis. So this is why it's so important, I think, that we start really getting to know what are the patterns that run us, because the unconscious patterns that we actually develop in the first 3 years of our lives, they are unconsciously running our lives and running our physiology. So if women want to have a healthy menopause, they don't have to, only eat kale and become plant-based and meditate 7 hours a day. I mean, you could do that if you want to, but it's less about that and more about really spending some time working on what is it that I'm terrified of? What am I trying to avoid? Am I setting my goals based on avoiding stuff I don't want? Or am I creating what I would love? Am I living according to the dictates of my ego, which is fear-based? Or am I living according to the dictates of, I don't know, my spirit or my heart or whatever you want to call that? And that's important all the way through our lives. And so what happens is we don't look after that part because we're busy. I get that. We're busy. But you know what? It's not because we're busy. It's because we've got underlying patterns of I'm unworthy, I'm not good enough, I don't belong, I need to be perfect, I don't fit in, I'm invisible, I don't matter, everyone's needs matter more than mine. And we think that that stuff is true. It's a story we've been making up based on our past experiences in our lives. We don't spend time with that because we don't have time for that. But the truth is, when things start getting really real, and you are having the headaches, and you are having the flushes, and you are having the night sweats, and they're waking you up at night, and you're like, oh my word, I need to take some medication to sort out my menopause, I'd say, well, by all means, take the medication. No problem with that. But you know what, if you're just taking medication to put a lid on it, you're just suppressing it. And if you're trying to stay young and fertile, you're missing out on, it's like a little girl not wanting to go through puberty. What is she going to miss out on? You can't stay 9 forever, right? So why would you want to stay 35 forever? And that's why it truly is a passage to power. Women can either use it to, and with a lot of women, it really can break you. It's not, listen, I'm busy going through it at the moment, okay? So I used to talk this line 20 years ago already, right? But now it's really real. So now it's like, okay, Loretta, are you actually walking the talk? And the truth is, I am actually walking the talk. And I do recognize that there are certain things that definitely are probably menopausally related. But, instead of going, oh my goodness, I need to medicate this now, I can certainly medicate in order to help me. But my question to myself is, okay, Loretta, what are these hot flushes trying to tell you? So I think of hot flushes as turning on your inner turbines. I have a nuclear reactor. And every time I flush, it means that reactor is turning up a little bit more, which is giving me an opportunity to step into a more powerful, or not even powerful, a more complete version of who I am. Not the woman that I was at 35. There's nothing wrong with the woman I was at 35. I love her. But you know what? I'm 53 now. I'm not that woman anymore. So who am I now? Those questions are sometimes scary because we think that too much is going to have to change. Well, if you keep on doing the same thing you've always done, you're going to keep on getting the same results you've always gotten. And so we can either embrace this change, or we can go, oh no, it's menopause, it's all over, game over, might as well give up now. I don't believe that. I don't believe that that's necessary for anyone.
Wow, I love the way that you perceive this. And it's such a mind shift, even for myself, to prepare myself, in my adulthood, to think of it differently. And Paul, have you learned something through this session, being the male in the room?
I'm listening intently with a view to now having more skills for when my wife gets to this point in her life. But right now, thankfully, we're not there. so I don't have to buy another home to live in just yet.
Loretta,
Hmm,
I have never had hot flushes or anything like that.
right.
It's never happened to me. I don't know
So-
what it means. Why did that
So-
happen?
So, Mary, I don't know. So listen, this is so the like most fluid answer to that question is, oh, Mary, you're one of the lucky ones. Okay, but I don't believe in luck.
My mom also
I
didn't
believe-
have it.
Yeah, okay. I believe that luck is where preparation and opportunity meet each other. All right. But I'll give you a sort of a scientific reason for that. Genetically, we have certain genes that run certain hormonal processes, and there's one particular gene. It's called COMT-T. COMT-T is part of what's called the methylation pathway, and methylation is one of the detoxification pathways in the liver. And COMT-T is specifically involved in methylating estrogen. Now, there are other methylation genes. So I, for example, am a poor methylator. I have poor gene expression for methylation, which means that I don't process hormones particularly well without supplementing with folate. So this is the other beautiful thing about these genes. They don't need fancy things to make them work. Like one of them is folate, for example, the natural form of folate. If you've got poor methylation and you take folate, it really makes things a whole lot better for you. So these gene lines run in families. So I don't know what your methylation profile looks like, but I'd go, well, off the top of my head, Mary, there's a very good chance that both your mother and you have really good methylation genes, possibly good detoxification genes from your liver. And as a consequence of that, the women in your family line, should they inherit those genes, actually go through menopause more easily.
Paul, you don't have to worry about Dina.
Yes,
Jeez.
that's a possibility. So, like Paul, you still have to worry about Dina, because no matter what genetics she has, you are going to work on her nerves probably in midlife. So you are going to
I
have to
work
start
on
working on
Zena's
that.
nerves already. Don't worry. It's odd though. It's something that I've never really, perhaps it's being a man, but I've never really worried about it either in dealing with my wife or thinking about it. It just, menopause to me, obviously there is a scientific basis for it, and it's something that does happen. But I think it's like many things in life. If you worry about it, it's going to be worse.
Mm. What
This
you
is
focus
true.
on is
Okay,
fame.
I would be, sorry, I'd go as far as to say, well, you know what, Paul, you're a man, so you think you don't have to worry about it. No offense. And also, and listen, I'm not criticizing your stance. And you're right. The more hysterical we get about it, the more problematic it will be. But there's a difference between not worrying about it at all and not actually knowing what to expect. It's a bit like I can fall pregnant and go, millions of women over millennia have had babies. So I'm just going to see whatever happens to my body and go with the flow. Possible. And I might have a completely problem-free pregnancy. Or if I'm an anxious Annie, I'd be like, oh, I'd like to know what happens in month 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because that reassures me and allows me to go through my pregnancy more smoothly. So it's different strokes for different folks. However, I can't, I'm going to lie about the statistics now. But just imagine it's this kind of scenario. In the States, I'm making up the numbers, but I was trying to give you an idea of the proportions. Something like the health research budget, let's just say it's $200 million. Let's just say of the $200 million, the proportion that is actually allocated to researching women's health is probably like something like 0.5%. And like 0.1% of that is actually allocated to menopausal health. That is how disregarded older women's health actually is in the world. Also, one of the sort of reasons for medicalizing menopause is that you have an increased risk of heart disease when you go through menopause. A woman, you have an increased risk of brittle bones and osteoporosis. But what they don't say is that your risk becomes the same as a man's, because estrogen confers protection against heart disease and others. It's an anti-inflammatory hormone. So when you are fertile and you have higher levels of estrogen, you have a lower risk of, let's say, heart attacks and coronary artery disease than men. And when you've gone through menopause, you have the same risk as a man the same age as you, with the same medical profile as you. So it's not like suddenly as a woman, you become 7 times more likely to drop dead than your male counterpart from a heart attack. It's a lot of it is actually just scaremongering. That's my honest opinion. So I think that it's useful to be prepared and to know that this is what's happening. And many women don't know what to expect until they're actually in it. And at that point, it becomes very easily to just get into that sort of medical system and get medicalized. So we supplement your estrogen, we put you on an antidepressant, and we give you something to help you sleep.
Thank you
fine,
so much.
that's what you want to do. Sorry,
Yes.
that's fine. That's what you want to do. But there are different ways. I would just like people to know that there's a different way.
Thank you so much, Loretta. You really brought a very different perspective, on menopause, almost something to look forward to, stepping into your own power and being your authentic self finally, and stop giving everything that you have to everyone around you. So it's something to look forward to, in a sense. What's your last final thought that you would leave our listeners for today?
So if I was going to give anyone advice who is actually in menopause or in perimenopause or was concerned about it, so maybe you've got a relative that's menopause was hectic, your mom may have had a difficult time. I would urge you to worry less about your hormones and more about how well you're managing your stress. Like, what is stressing you and how well are you managing your stress? And optimizing your liver health. So one of the things that, and you can optimize your liver health by obviously trying to avoid as many chemicals as you can, right? So avoid processed food if you can. But one thing that women are not usually aware of is that there are a lot of chemicals that are estrogen-like compounds that have to be removed by your liver in our everyday, what do they call them? Not our cosmetics, like your self-care products, body lotions, face creams, makeup, air fresheners, the stuff that we clean our houses with. So, we don't often think of those. We think about, like, what am I putting in my mouth, or what am I eating, what am I drinking? And that is important. But do a little audit on how many parabens and other estrogen-like chemicals do you have in your environment, and try and minimize that, because that's going to improve the health of your liver. And if you manage your stress effectively, if you don't know how, there are lots of apps and there are coaches and there are therapists that can help you with that. It's going to preserve your adrenal health. And the healthier your adrenals are, the more resilient you're going to be to go through any part of your life, but particularly through your menopause.
Thank you so much, Loretta. This was very valuable. And we actually look forward to also seeing and talking to you on other topics. I don't want to give it away quite yet. You've touched on some of it a bit earlier today. But thank you so much. I really, for myself, got a lot of value from this session.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me. It really has been great.
Love your passion. Thanks for joining us, Loretta. We appreciate it. And that wraps up this edition of the Coaching Hour. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Marika.